In the southern United States, there is an abundance of wildlife. Deer, bear, turkey. But there is something else that also inhabits the piney woods. Something strange and elusive. Many believe it doesn't exist. But to those who have seen it, they know it's there. The southern United States remains a wilderness to this day. Dotted with small towns and urban areas, these piney woods are often forgotten except for the outdoorsmen who live here. Swamps and large tracts of wooded areas separate the few towns. There are no major cities here, just miles and miles of forest land and farms. Lurking in these forest lands is an animal few have seen, with names like swamp ape, skunk ape, booger, and Bigfoot. This animal is blamed for the deaths of pets, farm animals, and even people. To find this elusive animal, you have to know what to look for, and to know the animal's behavior, you have to hunt it.
I'm Don McDonald, and I'm a Bigfoot hunter. The main reason I hunt is to protect people. I get reports constantly from people who are having these things come up. A lot of people have their dogs killed, had their chickens killed. I know a family down around Red Bluff area down by Columbia. They lost 7 or 8 geese. A coyote is not going to mess with a goose. If there's 6 or 8 of them in a pile, a coyote is not going to mess with them. Something had plucked those geese and laid the feathers in a nice neat pile and gone off with the rest of the body. Will a coyote do that? I think not. But you've got people that are having their homes beat on. They're scared to go outside at night. I know some families who will not go outside their front door unless they've got a gun in their hand. I talked to some people up in North Mississippi the other day. They actually heard something beating on the side of their house one night, and something peeked in on their 8-year-old daughter and looked in the window at their daughter. The daughter described it as a big gorilla-looking thing. Now, the bottom of the windowsill, is about chest high. So this thing was leaned over and hunched over and looking in the window. The next night, they heard a loud racket outside and their air conditioner went off. Something had gone out there and picked up an outside air conditioner unit and threw it 30 feet across the yard. The first dent in the ground was 20 feet away. So something threw this thing 20 feet in the air before it hit the ground and rolled another 10 feet. A human can't do that. And it takes an opposable thumb to be able to pick something up and throw it. A bear can't, it's not gonna pick it up. It would swat it away. And there are a lot of bears in Mississippi. They are making a big comeback, but this was not a bear. No opposable thumb to pick it up.
My name's Joey Hawkins, and I'm a Bigfoot hunter. Doctors, lawyers, military people, policemen, they've all seen these creatures just like I have. So I got into hunting Bigfoot because I wanted answers. I wanted to see, what is this creature? How many of them are there? Where do they live all the time? Do they live in family groups? It's a mystery. I love a good mystery. So, once I got involved in it and began to understand that, no matter how much proof you hand to the scientific community, they're not going to believe it until, like I said, they can do an autopsy on one. Or necropsy, I guess, if it's an animal. But, I hunt Bigfoot. The mystery part of it, I've met a lot of interesting people. I enjoy the comradeship, the camaraderie of having a single goal with these people and enjoy doing this. And, like I said, I want to solve the mystery.
I'm Brian Sons from Ackerman, Mississippi. I think for me, the reason I do it is because I want to understand what they are, how they're able to exist, how they're able to survive. I think there's a lot to learn from them in those aspects.
My name is Scott Marlowe, and I'm a Bigfoot hunter. If I know the genome of other human species and I can relate that carefully to the Bigfoot DNA or potential Bigfoot DNA, yet I can see differences that would render it a different species. It would, to me, indicate that there's something there we don't know about. And by definition, it would almost certainly be a Bigfoot. The particular species, or what it is anthropologically speaking and taxonomically speaking, is another issue.
It's one thing to hear stories of southern Sasquatch encounters, but quite another when you see it for yourself. The southern Sasquatch is a monstrous beast like no other animal in the forest. Though elusive, the creature is seen by many, and their encounters are frightening.
We were going up the hill, and the dog heard something and alerted and bolted up ahead of us. When we got to the top of the hill, we heard the dog whelp real loud and then come bolting back between us with his tail tucked between his legs. Now, us being, Boy Scouts and teenagers, we had to go find out what was going on. We got to the top of the hill, and there was this dead 120 to 150 pound hog laying there, and it was still quivering. It was so freshly dead. Its back legs were snapped, they were broken. And we looked up in the tree, and what we thought was a limb about 6 feet off the ground, it was actually a rib bone from that hog. Something had grabbed that hog by the back legs, slammed it into the tree so deadgum hard that it broke a rib and stuck it into the side of that pine tree. And when the dog come up, I guess it ran it off, and we saw some ruffled up leaves, so we followed them down to the bottom. And when we got to the bottom of the creek down there, that's where we found the 16-inch track at the bottom of the hill. It was a 5-toed track, so obviously that means there's a healthy breeding population. When you start getting into loss of digits, that's where you start getting some inbreeding, which is going to happen every time that situation comes about. But that was a real good encounter there. I didn't actually get to see one, but finding that hog, no animal, no human can pick up a 100-something pound hog and slam it 6 feet off the ground into a tree that hard. It just can't happen.
Well, the very first time I encountered the animal, I was a pre-med student at Rollins College, Winter Park, Florida, and pulled my grocery bag out and was going to head back to the apartment. When I stood up, I saw this thing standing behind a lamppost right off the parking lot in the shadows. And at first I thought it was a person, but it wasn't. It was much taller, not a whole lot taller, but it was taller than an average person. And I could tell that it was hairy, even though it was very, very shadowy. I could see the white of the eyes, but that's about all I could see. I knew it was some sort of a creature. And I'd froze because I was pretty scared at the moment. And as I sat there or stood there looking at it, it eventually took interest in the trash dumpster, which was off to its left, my right, and kept looking back and forth, not really quickly, but I eventually realized it was more interested in probably feeding out of the dumpster than it was in me. And I began backing up to the landing for the stairway that went up to the second story, and over a period of a few minutes backed all the way up to the level where my apartment was, set my groceries down on the ground long enough to unlock my door to get inside, and when I turned back around, it was gone.
I started walking down the hill. Well, the moon had come out and I could see to walk, so I didn't have my flashlight on. Well, I got probably halfway down and I saw what I thought from a distance was a tree. And as I got closer to it, I realized there's no tree there. That tree would have been in the way when I was raking hay. It would have been in the way. I wouldn't have been able to rake that right there. So I said, So I eased on down and got a little closer. Well, as I got probably, I would say 40 yards from it, it moved. But when it moved, I stopped. And I had my flashlight in my hand, so I turned my light on and I shined up. And when I shined up, this creature turned away from me and stepped down into the creek behind the trees. I have a extremely large hand. My hand would have looked like a child's hand. inside the hand that I saw hanging down beside this creature. Well, I'm not, I turned and I ran. I'm not gonna lie. All I had with me was a little .22 Magnum pistol is all I had on me, because that's what I use for coyotes. So I turned and I ran. And I got back to the top of the hill and I told my cousin, I said, hand me your AR. I said, man, I don't know what this is. I said, but it's big. I said, it's taller than I am. It's bigger than I am. I said, it's huge.
I was actually on the porch talking on the phone with a female friend, and I saw, I had been looking at this spot for a while, and there was something dark in a ditch. And suddenly I saw this thing rise up, walk up out the ditch, just one step up out the ditch. It was a pretty deep ditch. Step one step out the ditch and cross over a gravel road and go off into the woods. And instantly on the phone, I'm like, I gotta let you go, I gotta let you go. I swear I just saw a Bigfoot. So I hung up. I got my buddy who was staying there at the same time, and we walked over to where I had seen this thing get up and walk across the road into the woods. And there was nothing there, but there was a foul odor. That's the only thing we could ever, pick up from that. But it was so big and just jet black. This was in August. It was the heat of summer. It was in the evening, and it was so big and black. And at first I'm like, well, it's got to be someone, wearing a black hoodie, but there's no way. I mean, I cannot see anyone at all. The temperature was very high. I cannot see anyone at all wearing a black hoodie and just sitting in a ditch out next to a cornfield.
Southern Sasquatch hunters are acutely aware of all indigenous animals in the woods they hunt. Most have been outdoorsmen all their lives. They know the difference between a bear and something else. It's the difference between knowledge and experience. However, when a Southerner encounters something that should not be in their woods, the need to explain it is great. So far, hunters can only speculate what the Southern Sasquatch is. Their opinions vary as much as the description of the animal itself.
I'm fairly certain that what we're looking at is a undiscovered type of primate, which would put it in the great ape category. I'm not 100% certain that it would be a great ape other than a human type species, simply because the track evidence that I've seen for both the classic Sasquatch and the swamp ape shows parallel toes. And the only parallel toes in any great ape is that of a human. So Dr. Meldrum may be correct in his presumption that they're some sort of relic hominin. I'm not sure who's right. That's going to take a whole lot more research.
Well, the question of what Bigfoot is it remains a perplexing one. I mean, my null hypothesis, my working hypothesis, based on the evidence that I have encountered, by far the majority of the evidence I've encountered, suggests that it's a great ape. And by that I mean it's more closely allied with the other existing great apes, part of an extensive radiation of which chimps, orangs, and gorillas are just the fleeting remnants of these relic populations in tropical refugia that are on the verge of extinction. Much earlier in geologic time, the ape radiation was much more diverse, much broader, and included the temperate zones of Europe and Southern Asia, and had contained a great diversity in body size and in diet and locomotor habits, and included a primate that was gigantic, Gigantopithecus. It achieved dimensions that makes it the right size in the right place at the right time to be a likely ancestor of the Sasquatch.
Personally, I believe that I subscribe more to the theory that, in Asia, back several thousand years ago, there was a large ape that was called Gigantopithecus blacki. And, assuming that a land bridge did exist between Asia and the North American continent at that time, and that's pretty much been proven, I think we're looking at the adaptation, of a hominid that came, maybe, that was either a branch off of Gigantopithecus blacki. It's a creature. It's You know, it's a great ape is what it is. I mean, you know, for lack of a better word, you know, it's an animal that has adapted. It's learned to walk upright. It's learned to defend itself that way. You know, a lot of animals adapt to various different things, but I mean, to get right down to it, I think that it is, you know, it is a branch off of the great ape family tree.
What is Bigfoot? You really won't know until one is put down and put on a slab for testing. What we believe it is, and based on 3 different DNA samples that I know have been tested, came back classified as unknown primate. In 1994, the GCBRO shot one at a hunt at Monster Central over in northwest Louisiana. They had the blood tested from 2 or 3 different labs, and all 3 different labs came back unknown primate. They didn't have a body to compare it to. Now, since then, I have learned of a sample in Texas and another sample in Oklahoma, you know, hundreds of miles away, where one was actually shot, the blood turned in for testing, and it came back unknown primate. They had nothing to compare it to. So right now, it's classified as an unknown primate. It's not human in any shape, form, or fashion. It's a primate.
Many believe that in order to truly understand what the southern Sasquatch is, then a specimen must be procured for science to study. Indeed, all cataloged animals began with the body of that creature. Science requires physical proof. Is it necessary to kill a Sasquatch to satisfy the demands of science?
Science is going to do what science is going to do. They're going to examine the bodies and think they know everything from taking that body, dissecting it, and looking, and they're going to look at what they've done with other animals. They're going to look at the eyes, and it kind of matches, you know, a gorilla. They're going to look at how a gorilla acts. They're going to think that they know everything already, where they really should come to people like me, the GCBRO, and there's several other groups out there that have had a lot of experience with these things as far as the behavior. The behavior is the one thing they cannot come up with by any kind of dissection or looking at these creatures. There's no way they can do it.
I think it would take a body, but then again, at the same time, I wonder if that body has or would be covered up. Unless they do it the right way, and it's a body, I think that it would be covered up.
I know Bigfoot exists. You know, you can't prove. I think that there are 3 kinds of people in this world when it comes to Bigfoot. You got people that you could lay a body down in front of them, they're never going to believe it. Oh, that's fake. Okay, those are the non-believers. Then we have the believers. You know, they either had some kind of an experience or somebody in their family had an experience that they, you know, believe and have faith in. Those are the believers. Then you have the knowers. You have people like me and people and like the guys that I go with when we do this. We know Bigfoot exists. There's no doubt in our mind that he exists.
What you have to have in order to be able to really put this together is photographic evidence supported by physical evidence, supported by DNA that says this is something other than a genome we know about, but it's related to or close to this genome, meaning human or some other ape. And then you have to have absolutely irrefutable chain of custody on the evidence, in addition to having all of the sightings attested by people who are accepted as being beyond reproach. You could have a body, that's fine, that works. In a simple world, that's true, but I'm not for killing anything, much less an animal that's apparently as rare as this one is.
The southern Sasquatch is not alone. Around the world there are similar creatures that resemble it and may be its cousins. Creatures that prowl the world remaining elusive to man. The Yeti, Yowie, and Yiran, to name a few. They exist on the edge of known science, waiting to be discovered by man.
Oh, I think there's way more than just one species that we're looking at. They may be a related genera, but they're not necessarily the same species. They're reported all over the world, some of them no bigger than a chimpanzee, even smaller, like the orang pendek. There are others that are reported that have certain interesting issues that would make them the swamp ape that I believe and have dealt with. And then I think the Sasquatch, which probably is a whole lot taller than the other two, which is properly adapted to mountainous and forested areas, that it does that. And again, the track evidence supports it. I have tracks from the swamp ape that I'm sure are swamp ape tracks, and the shape of the foot and the way that the foot anatomy works, underlying everything is pretty much identical to that of humans, but there's different adaptations in those tracks. In the case of the swamp ape, it's much more adapted to swimming and being in water and being in soft ground like a swamp, whereas the mountainous type of, and I should also mention that it appears from the tracks I have that the toes are webbed in the swamp ape tracks. Whereas with the classic Bigfoot, the toes splay, the foot is more of a trapezoidal shape, but the underlying anatomy is still very similar to that of a human.
Eventually, this creature will be discovered officially by science. This discovery will change our worldview completely and give satisfaction to those who hunt for the southern Sasquatch. It isn't a matter of if, it's a matter of when.
If Bigfoot, or when it's discovered, it's going to be probably the biggest scientific discovery ever. It's going to change the way everybody looks at things. Some of it good, some of it not good. There's way too many tree huggers out right now. They're going to want to take and all your tree cutting in areas where these things have been found. There would be no more pine tree cutting. Tree prices, pine or oak, whatever, are going to skyrocket through the roof because there's going to be very few places that timber companies can come in and cut the trees. Scientific wise, it's going to be real good. It's going to change everybody's point of view, and all these people, including myself, who have been just given heck all these years, and I told you so. And that's going to be a wonderful feeling.
Southern Sasquatch hunters are all self-funded. There are no scientific or university grants funding expeditions. It's a devotion toward discovery that drives the hunters on. Part hobby and part serious business, Sasquatch hunters are committed to exposing the reality of this beast.
You know, I've been asked that question a lot because I don't think the government's going to give me a research fund to, go out and look for Bigfoot. If they would, I'd quit my job, and I'd go hunt Bigfoot full time. It's like anything else. I mean, why do people spend $2,000 on a set of golf clubs? Why do they join a country club that they pay $250 a month for to play a challenging golf course? Why do they do that? Why do they take that money out of their pocket? It's something they enjoy, it's something that they want to do, and it's something they don't mind investing time and money in. And it's the same thing with me, I have night vision equipment, I have recorders, I have all types of stuff, but this is stuff that I've bought over the years, that I've kept, taken care of, and I use. When I hunt Bigfoot, I carry a 12 gauge shotgun with double-aught buckshot, 3-inch magnums, and my backup weapon's a 38 special. Those weapons are not going anywhere. I have them. I don't mind spending that money for that. As far as putting, my time and effort into it, it's like I said before, taking everybody spends money on something they enjoy, and this is something that I enjoy.
The reason I spend my own money is because I believe it. I know these things are real because I've seen one. I want to learn more about these creatures, and I want to help people out. Nobody's going to pay me money to go out and do this. I don't have a government grant. No big money guy's gonna come in, here's $20,000. I've got a side-by-side. I pay for that out of my back pocket to get into these back pig trails. I bought a $4,000 thermal scope. I've probably got $10,000 more worth of equipment that's come out of my own pocket to help pay for my trips, because like I said, I want to learn more about these things. And these people, you don't understand how scared some of these people are. And if I can help one person out, it's just to feel better about themselves and keep these creatures away. There's certain things you can do to keep these creatures away. It's worth it all to me.
To hunt the southern Sasquatch, you need to know what to look for and what equipment you will need to procure a specimen. Simply going into the woods to camp or hunt will not work. The southern Sasquatch is elusive and clever. The odds are you've been near one and never even knew it. The beast is always there, watching you.
As far as Bigfoot evidence you find out in the woods, I mean, there are 2 or 3 different kinds you're going to find. You're going to find possible tracks, which if you find a track, there's 2 reasons for that track. It made a mistake or it left it on purpose. We know from years of experience what to look for. If you see something that's got an arch in it, in the bottom of your foot, that's a human track. And this a human track looks a lot different. These are flatter all the way through, anywhere from 3 to 5 toes. And it takes a lot of experience to be able to learn the difference in those 2. Another thing you'll find, you might find a teepee structure out there where something's been hiding in. You look for, say there's several limbs around a tree. First thing you want to do is look at the ground. You want to see if you can find where the base of that tree is. Next thing you want to look for is look up in the tree to see if some limbs could have fell there. If there's no other possible explanation of how these things could have fell, one of 2 things has happened. Either somebody or something has put those limbs there. And you don't ever really know because you don't see these animals put it there. We find a lot of tipped limbs up around 7 or 8 foot tall, where something has come through and it's taken the limbs and snapped them off. That way they can be more stealthy the next time they come through. Just different things you learn to look at after a lot of years of experience, and you know what you're looking for then.
Well, we have to look at environment, I think, and adaptation again. Most of the ones that if you talk to people down here, every now and then they will say, they saw one 10 foot tall. Most of the sightings in this part of the country, they range anywhere from 6.5 to 7 feet tall. If you go to California, if you go, into, let's say Nepal, where they have the abominable snowman, which is believed to be a Sasquatch as well. These creatures are always described as being 10, sometimes 11 foot tall.
I think it has to do with terrain. I think it has to do with diet as well. I know that I have seen some large ones that look similar to what you see, what you imagine with the Pacific Northwest, the large ones, the Patterson-Gimlin film, for example. I have seen 1 or 2 that look like that, but for the most part, the ones I see here are very, very lanky.
It's really more aggressive. These Bigfoot creatures we have in the South, and that South I mean from Oklahoma down through, say, Houston, Texas, back over this way and into Georgia, up into Tennessee, in this whole area down in here, they're just a lot more aggressive. They're not scared of people. Sure, you have 99.9% of these creatures, they want to be left alone. They don't want people out in the woods even trying to holler and get them to holler back. They want to be left alone. But we think with, the inbreeding going on with so many creatures, we're finding a lot of 3 and 4 toe tracks. That loss of digits tells me it's inbreeding, and I think that's what's causing some of these creatures to be rogue animals.
Different types of signs of animal activity that is unexplainable. Today at this event we've discussed people or something picking up a hog and 6 feet in the air throwing it up against a tree with such force that a rib sticks in the tree when the animal falls off of it. Okay, that's not something a bear can do. That's not something a mountain lion can do. especially not at that height. And a hog certainly isn't going to do it to itself. What other animal could possibly do that?
I take a shotgun. I like a shotgun because if I have to take one of these specimens, if the opportunity presents itself, at close range, a rifle bullet will go slam through a target, you know, and that creature can still get to you and hurt you. So I take a 12 gauge shotgun. If you hit something in the chest with double-aught buckshot, 3-inch Magnum, 12 gauge, it's not getting up, okay? I mean, it's really not. It's got enough stopping power. It's gonna fall.
Look for things like tree limb twists and breaks that could only be accomplished with an opposable thumb. It's very hard to grab something with just this type of a mechanism and be able to do that type of damage. Certainly bears don't do that at that height. Hair evidence in places that it doesn't belong. Again, 6 or 7 feet off the ground. Of course, things can blow, but you know, if you find a tuft of hair at that kind of a height, something's not quite right. So you basically look for that, and of course the track evidence, handprints, anything along those lines, or unexplained deaths and mutilations of any type of large animal.
As far as going into the woods and calling and hollering, I don't believe in that, simply for the fact that when you get out of your vehicle and you close your door, they know you're there. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. You don't have to go out and holler. Back several years ago when I first got into the Bigfooting, yeah, I tried the tree knocking and then the little hollering, and I've got a response maybe twice. I've had a better response by just going out and setting up a campfire.
I take, I take 3 flashlights, extra batteries, extra bulbs. I take night vision. I don't have infrared yet. That's something I want to get. I've got a voice recorder. I take a camera. I've got a video camera that I take with me.
But where's the thicket around me or something where they've got cover? I've been smoked over many times doing that. Look up, and there's 2 big old red eyes, 7 or 8 foot off the ground. You don't have to go looking for them. They're gonna come find you. As a real good friend of mine, Jim Lansdale, says, they don't have any entertainment. We are their entertainment.
Well, I always bring cameras. I bring GPS units with me. I like to have infrared if I can. I like a flare. They're extremely expensive, the good ones, but that's a very handy device to have. That's forward-looking infrared. But I never carry a gun. Again, I'm a no-kill person.
But basically, flashlight, knife, gun, plenty of ammunition. My backpack, I take, rain gear if I think it's going to rain. A small first aid kit. Just basic stuff that you would have in the wilderness.
In 2014, Brian's sons recorded what may be a southern Sasquatch on his video camera. Though not clear and not definitive, he did capture something. His story is compelling. This may be rare footage of 2 southern Sasquatch caught on video.
I don't know exactly what it is. I heard a wood knock. I flipped my camera on. I'm looking for snakes. It was the middle of summer. I'm trying to walk. I'm not actually even looking ahead of me. I'm looking through the little viewfinder when I do look. But when I got home, I reviewed this video, and that's when I saw something moving on it. When you watch the video, what you see is something come up from out of a ravine, something coming down a tree. The thing in the tree looks like it jumps on or in the arms of the bigger thing, and then the bigger thing turns and goes down the ravine, back down the ravine. I sent it to my friends with the crypto crew. I sent it to those guys to analyze it, to slow it down maybe. They did. They agree there's two figures that can be seen in it. Again, it's the curse of Sasquatch, the blurry, the blurry video, the blurry figure, if you will.
Films and video of the creature abound. Most, however, are hoaxes. It's rare to get even blurry video of the animal on camera. Most that see the Sasquatch are not prepared to film or photograph it. And even if they did, films and photographs would not stand up as evidence.
That's a sore subject, and it really is a two-edged sword. In part, the hoaxes draw attention to the animal. The news media certainly likes to jump on it because they like to make fools out of everybody that goes out looking for Bigfoot. Very rarely do they take us seriously, but they're in it for the sensational entertainment value. Unfortunately, that leaves scientists with a bad taste in their mouth. So the serious search for the animal is hampered by all the hoaxes that are perpetrated.
Back when I first got into it, there was almost a code between all the Bigfooters. If you hoaxed or did something that was stupid, you got called out and you got banned from the group, and you were no longer allowed to get on there and post. Now everybody is posting all this bull crap on there. Oh, what about this right here? It's ruining things. But the good thing about the TV shows is helping people that have really had encounters to not be scared to talk about it. People still give others grief and call them crazy, you're on drugs, but people are opening up now, so we're getting a lot more reports.
I think probably more than anything is the Patterson-Gimlin film. I've watched it many times, and I think that's probably the definitive piece of evidence that we have right now, beyond DNA. I mean, we've got DNA evidence, and there's some pictures out there that clearly show something.
Even with in this age of digital photography, by the time you produce your cell phone, you charge it up, you set it to take a picture, and you try to snap, they're already gone, or they're in motion. Some of the things I've seen are motion blur, and some of it is just really bad focusing. But I think most of the bad focused material that you see is deliberately so. In other words, it indicates a hoax.
Well, hoaxes create a dimension to this research that that others don't necessarily have to contend with, pursuing more orthodox questions. And it complicates and muddies the water a bit, but I think that the bulk of the evidence certainly is above reproach, and on its own merits makes a compelling case that there is a creature, a species that's unrecognized.
When I saw Bigfoot, I had no doubt in my mind, that's Bigfoot. I knew subconsciously I knew what it was, but then after I looked on the internet and did some research, I understood then, yeah, that's what you saw. So these people are not mistaken, bears and mountain lions and these other animals for Bigfoot. If you ever see one, that image will stick in your mind, and you'll know, definitively, that's not a bear,
There are few facts regarding this animal. Questions about its anatomy, behavior, and diet often emerge in the Bigfoot community. Through long-term study and hunting for the animal, a few basic characteristics have emerged. Investigations of the species is ongoing, which is continually opening the window into their world, and Sasquatch hunters learn more each time they launch an expedition to look for the animal.
Science, they're not doing anything about it because it is a mythological creature that most people don't believe in. Most scientists don't want to put their name out there and get banished from every other deal that they have to do.
No scientist is going to claim it to be this, that, or the other thing until they've got an actual sample of the actual animal to compare it to. And that's largely true, but you would still know that it doesn't match any of the DNA genomes you have.
The problem that we run into is that science We have blood samples. We've had DNA tests. We've had hair found that's been tested, you know, that they can't tell us what it is. You know, we have the Patterson-Gimlin film. You know, there is so much evidence out there that should convince anybody with a logical, analytical mind that these creatures exist. Unfortunately, mainstream science is not going to believe these creatures exist till we can lay a body down in front of them and say, hey, now what is this?
Well, first you've got to definitely ascertain that the animal's there. Then you have to ascertain where they are and where they stay and why. And then you need to do the Dion Fossey, Jane Goodall work. But I mean, it's incremental. It's not something that's just going to happen. And certainly being a weekend warrior and going out there and trying to play habituation isn't going to function. You've got to actually live with them before they're going to gain any kind of trust to you. And then you've got the problem of Heisenberg's uncertainty principle. If you observe it, you may change their behavior by observing it. So it's not exactly an easy subject. It's not something that you can talk about and explain in 2 or 3 minutes. It is a very long process. But what we can learn by observing these animals could be astronomically important.
They're smart. I mean, they didn't survive this long without hardly having any detection at all, without being smart.
When someone picks up a weapon to his face, looks through it, it goes boom, something dies on the other end. I think they grasp that concept. I think that might also be part of why we have such a hard time capturing them on camera or video, because the first thing we do is we'll hold that camera up and look through it the same way you would a gun. So, you know, I don't think they know the difference between a camera and a gun, but they just know, hey, this human's making the same movements and same actions as what that hunter did, you know, when he killed that deer.
People wonder why they can't get these things on cameras. Well, there's thousands of trail cameras out there. Why can't they get them? One thing, we believe they can see in the infrared spectrum. You know, just like dogs can see in the infrared spectrum. You know, you've seen the laser pointers where people have their dogs chasing the little pointer. Well, a friend of mine, he was sitting there and had a remote control in his hand, infrared, the remote control to your TV, but you can't see the beam. He was sitting there and wasn't paying attention. His dog was turning circles. That infrared beam that you could not see was on the floor. That dog was chasing that beam. These things can see in the same thing. They see that beam out there that's going to detect, to set that motion detector off to get the picture. They'll also, most times they'll watch you put the camera out. Where do people put cameras? On the side of the tree, 5 or 6 feet off the ground in a wide open on a strap. I can walk through and see the cameras. And these things, have watched you put them out. You've got human smell on them. You know, a deer can smell you at 100 yards off. You pick that camera up, you touched it, you got human scent on it.
My personal feeling and my personal take from what I've seen and experienced is that their society is something like a guerrilla society in which there is a dominant male that tolerates other males in the tribe as long as they are only adolescent, shall we say, but once they reach sexual maturity, they are driven off and become rogue males until they establish their own harem, if you will, of females.
So right now it's classified as an unknown primate. It's not human in any shape, form, or fashion. It's a primate.
It's possible it's a human species, but then you have to define the word. What does that mean? Is human something only in the genus Homo, in which we now know we've had at least a dozen different varieties? Or is it strictly a Homo sapiens sapiens, which is what we are? And no, I don't think it's a Homo sapiens sapiens.
It's just amazing how sharp they are. Imagine a 4 or 5 year old child with 30 to 40 years of life experience. You know, the intelligence is there. It's not quite, you know, as full as we are, but with that life experience, that's something to be reckoned with in the woods.
The description and behavior of the southern Sasquatch is unique. Smaller and more aggressive than its counterparts around the world, it's often described as a monster. The southern Sasquatch is quick and elusive. It shuns any human contact, but it's also curious and stealthy, a lethal combination for an aggressive species.
Southern Bigfoot is not this big bulky creature you see like on the Patterson-Gimlin film. They're not big-butted and just not chunky looking animals. They're more of an athletic animal, especially the males. The males are broad chested, big shoulders, kind of like a linebacker would be in the NFL. They don't have much of a neck, really no neck at all. Big broad shoulders, big barrel chested, small waisted, athletic legs, and they will get down on all fours and can book it.
They're not as muscle bound as what we know of the Pacific Northwest, and that could be beneficial for them to maneuver through the terrain here in the South, swamps, vines. It may be beneficial to weigh less and to be more slender, whereas in the Pacific Northwest, the mountainous regions, I can see where it would be beneficial to have large bulk.
If you look at the American West, California, Oregon, Washington, you've got grizzly bears. They had to get bigger, they had to get stronger, and they had to adapt in order to survive in that environment. Down here we have, milder winters. Our winters are not as hard as they are in the mountains, as hard as they are up north. We don't have the predators down here. Our largest bear, the largest male bear that you would probably find in Mississippi might weigh 250 pounds, whereas a grizzly in Northern California may weigh close to 2,000 pounds. You don't have to be as big. It's not as hard to survive here. There's richer food sources all year long here, so they live, I think, an easier life, so they didn't have to get as big, they didn't have to get as strong. I think they are the same creatures. I think the ones there adapted to their environment, and the ones here adapted to this environment here.
There have to be thousands, and why we don't find them is anybody's question. They certainly would have not have enough genetic diversity to sustain a viable population if it's anything less than thousands. But then you have to remember, at one time, probably after Mount Tobor erupted, there were less than 7,000 people, humans in the world, and if you look at our own genetic makeup, you can see that there was an enormous bottleneck, and that we are all more closely related than we care to believe.
Anytime that a Bigfoot's going to come in on you, and remember this, they're never alone. There's never one Bigfoot. They're going to use one as a decoy every single time. They're going to have one making racket to draw your attention, while the other one sneaks up and gets a good look at you. Now, the one thing I've had happen 2 or 3 times, that would happen, then all of a sudden, noise would overhear, and you would focus over and, that sucker's coming in behind over here. And I've learned to kind of keep my hearing and kind of my feelings back over this way, and you could hear something easing up. Now, the one thing people don't think about it, these things will get on all fours. A lot of people know that. These things will also get down and belly crawl. They will belly crawl just like you're doing in the military, up under the barbed wire and everything, and basic training. They will belly crawl right up on you.
In order to have the kind of mind that be able to think the way they apparently think, to do the intelligent things that they clearly do, adapted to the environment they live in and what they're used to, which is not our technical environment. We're so used to our television sets and our binoculars and our cell phones and all of this. That's second nature to us, but they know nothing of that. On the other hand, we know nothing of where they live in the woods, relatively speaking, since we don't exist there as a rule. So the bottom line becomes, for them to think the way they do, they must have meat fat. Their brains have to have meat fat to develop like that.
We got the big bang sticks. They don't want to be found, and they know that we kill a lot of things in the world. And I think they're smart enough to understand that if they get caught in our crossfire, that they will be killed as well.
I know people who've had encounters and they've had weapons on them, and the Sasquatch were very aggressive towards them, particularly when they raise their gun towards it.
I don't tell people what to think or what to do, and certainly I'm an animal activist more or less, but I still eat meat. I don't want to be the one that pulls the gun or pulls the trigger, but if other people want to do it, that's fine. I am totally against hunting for sport. If it serves no purpose other than food for another person, or you're going to just go out and trophy hunt or canned hunt or anything like that, you lose me.
The reason I hunt them is twofold. One, we want to prove the species. Science has dictated, and we've talked to many scientists, even the Smithsonian Institution has come up and said, it's going to take a body to prove a new species. You've got a mythological creature that most people don't believe in. They're not going to believe video, which can be doctored. They're not going to believe the thousands and thousands of foot tracks that have been cast. They're not going to believe anything. They're not going to believe a hair sample. The hair sample people find, did they pull it from the Bigfoot's body? You don't know where it came from. To science to believe it, it's got to be a body on the table for them to examine, to say it's real.
There's been DNA that's come back from hair and other things that's questionable. Some suggest that it's a bear, but we don't know that the hair that's been found, since it was never connected to the animal itself visually, that it wasn't a bear.
As the subject of Bigfoot becomes more popular, a few hardy individuals have chosen to try and find the animal. But hunting for Sasquatch is not like the actors you see on television programs. It can often be boring, and yet when an encounter happens, it can be terrifying. To search for Sasquatch, you have to know where to look and what to look for. It takes a special breed of outdoorsman to go looking for this beast.
The GCBRO is the Gulf Coast Bigfoot Research Organization. Our purpose is, 95% of what we do is research like what everybody else does. But we want to focus on not just, hey, Bigfoot crossed the road. We want to focus on trying to help people that are having these nuisance animals come up to their houses, killing their farm animals. If something kills a cow, what's a cow worth? You got a farmer. You just took food off his table and he's lost several $1,000s. I know some horses that have been ripped to shreds here in central Mississippi. And claw marks, where it was, the game wardens came out and looked at it. It was not a panther, which they say doesn't exist until you get them off to the side and they'll tell you. It was not a bobcat, it wasn't a coyote. The claw marks and just everything was ripped to shreds. That's taking money out of people's pocket, food out of their mouth. And those are the ones that we're trying to get a hold to.
The only way I would shoot is if we have one that's terrorizing people, killing their pets, being destructive. That's the kind of specimen that I'd like to take. If I'm out in the woods one night or one day and I see a Bigfoot, and maybe a little one or whatever, I'm not going to shoot. That's going to happen in order for mainstream science to ever acknowledge that these creatures exist. So yes, if I was charged by one, or if there was one that was being a nuisance, I would take the shot. I'd have to, because that's the only way we're ever going to prove the existence of these creatures, and then we can have them protected so that their habitat is left alone and they're not harassed and no more of them is killed.
Photographs by themselves in this day and age, because of the age of Photoshop, there is no way the photo alone is going to be enough. Video could really point us in the right direction, but it still is not going to be accepted as reality because you've got too much CGI going around now.
Anytime I go on an initial investigation, it's going to be in the daytime. People want to go out at night so they can hear these things scream more. I believe these animals are more vocal at night. I've heard more screams at night. But these things move all during the day and at night. I like to go out in the daytime so I can actually see. There's a track right there. There's a limb formation right there. A big wide trail. If you've got a trail like this, you see a bunch of little indentions in the ground, that's a deer trail. But if you've got a trail that's this wide and the main trail is this wide and it's perfectly flat, it took a flat-footed animal or people to cross that trail.
We kept hearing something across from us, but we never could really figure out what it was. And eventually I heard a twig break, and he heard it too. We were having a conversation, we just stopped and we looked, and across the road the woods thinned out, and behind a tree you could see a Sasquatch standing there. He was swaying back and forth like this. He was watching us. He was just standing there swaying. That is the first time that I ever pulled my weapon and prepared to shoot, because I did not know what this particular creature was going to do. and he couldn't have been more than 40 yards from us.
And there was something very tall, I would estimate 9 to 10 foot tall, but very thin, walking towards us. It was close to a road sign, that curve in the road there. So compared to it was very tall. We had something pretty good to tell the height of it from. It terrifies me when I see it walking towards us. All I see is a silhouette coming towards us, but it is definitely walking. We get down at the bottom of the hill, and he screams, "What the blank was that?" And I said, "Man, I don't know." I thought I was the only one that saw it. I just assumed you didn't see it because you never said anything. He said it scared me to death. I couldn't speak. I said, "Well, kind of the same thing here." Wasn't sure what it was, and we've discussed it 2 or 3 times since then, and we still can't come up with what it was. I think it was a Bigfoot. Might not. I don't know what it was. It was tall. It was alive, and it was walking towards us, and it was very, very scary.
So we go up and we get our fire going. We're sitting around. I've got my binocular over here about 75 yards away, and we hear something rustling over here in the woods. We're about 30 yards away from the woods, and we hear something walking, and you could tell it was bipedal. All right, we hear a few twigs snap, and all of a sudden, back behind us, we're focused over here, the swamp about a half mile away. That's where we hear the big boy set off. The scream, you could, at as far as it was, you could almost feel it vibrate in your chest. Well, wasn't 2 seconds later, we heard a higher pitched scream over here on the other side of us, about a quarter of a mile. Then we heard a real shrieky scream back over here. What we figured was this was the alpha male of the group. This must have been the female, and this was maybe a juvenile over here, and they were all kind of figuring out where they were in relationship to each other, because the big boy kept getting closer and closer, and I've got a recording of that. And the whole time, the coyotes just went absolutely crazy. And probably 30 minutes later, everything kind of quieted down. And we hear something moving again over there, and it was a lot louder. The footfalls were more of a thud when it stepped. And I couldn't help it. I had to turn my light on. And about this far apart and about 8.5 feet off the ground, there was 2 red eyes. And I promise you, they were 7 to 8 inches apart, center to center.
If I walk off in these woods right now and I don't want you to find me, you're gonna be hard pressed to find me. And I think, you're looking at a creature that lives in that environment all the time. So I don't think they have any trouble just disappearing. An encounter I had when I was a kid, I heard it running through the woods, it chased me, but I never saw it.
I usually wear a fairly wide brim hat, and we were out there, and he had both passive and active infrared. And on the active infrared cameras, we could never get the thing to show itself. But on the passive infrared, we could see it ducking from behind trees to see where we are, what we were doing, but it always would go back to the tree. And Chester had handed me one because we formed a triangle so that nothing could sneak up on us. Chris on at one point, Chester on another, and me on another. And he handed me the passive infrared unit to look at a particular area, which I did. And when I turned around to get the passive infrared from him, I was hit from behind with a stick. At first I thought it might have been just dropping out of the canopy, but then I realized I was wearing the high brim hat or wide brim hat, and there was no way that something from above me could have hit me behind the neck. And when I checked back here because it was hurting, it drew blood.
And at nighttime, I like to go sit out at night. That's also a lot of fun. I'll set my recorder up, 75 feet away from me with my parabolic dish. I'll turn it up so I catch all the ambient sounds all around. And it's nothing like having one of these monsters scream real loud, and then you've got coyotes in 2 or 3 different directions just getting set off and going ape crap crazy. It's a blast.
People say, well, why isn't one dead in the road? People hit animals all the time. Why isn't there one like? Well, you're looking at an animal that's a lot smarter than a deer. It's a lot smarter than a bear. It has the level of intelligence to know if a car's coming down the road, don't walk out in front of it. It'll hurt you.
Well, in my neck of the woods, the Green Swamp and the 10,000 Islands are hot spots for the swamp ape sightings. Certainly any large pine forest where their population is very sparse is a good thing. But I've seen distribution maps where sightings have been all over the country, and with hundreds and hundreds, actually literally thousands of sightings, there's got to be something there. Some apparently do live in grassland areas in the prairies. Some apparently do live in forests. The forests seem to be the #1 area, and of course it's easier to get lost in the forest than it is in a grassland, but who's to know?
Me and 2 other buddies of mine, we were down in Tallahassee Wildlife Management Area here, I guess it was 2.5 years ago. We went down in there about 2 miles down this old logging road, and we had to walk. They had the gates blocked off. We get down in there and we're sitting around. This is 8 or 9 o'clock at night, and we hear something moving in the woods. We hear it back behind us to start with, and then we start hearing it moving here. We hear it back over here, and we hear it back over here. We know what's going on. We're being circled. There's more than one of these creatures around there. Then all of a sudden, out of the corner of my eye, I saw something dark, and I snatched my head. I saw it go from a tree here to a tree over here in less than a second and a half of at least a 20 to 25 foot distance. You know, big trees. So it darted and stopped that fast. These things are just lightning fast. Probably a couple minutes later, another one of my buddies, man, I just saw it again. So 20, 30 minutes of this going on, and we keep seeing this thing dart from tree to tree to tree, and it's getting closer. We're still hearing the one back behind us. It's making a lot more racket while this one's trying to ease up on us. And then all of a sudden, the one over here, it's at night. By then, it's probably 10:30, 11 o'clock. The moon is starting to set. There were some small planted pines, maybe 12 foot tall. There was a full moon, I mean a bright moon right behind it. It stepped out behind the tree at 50 feet and stood there and started swaying back and forth. And I mean, you could see the outline of the hair perfectly. Now, we didn't all look dead at it. If you do that, it's gonna bolt. We kept talking to each other just like I'm talking right now, in just a plain voice. Man, do you see that? Yeah, I see him. And we were making circles, so each one of us could have a turn looking at that creature standing there. That was a humbling experience right there, and that's what made me go from a believer of Bigfoot to a knower of Bigfoot. Once you see one, you're a knower.
Now, up to that point, I had never smelled one, which is one of the reasons why I'm not particularly partial to the name skunk ape for what I see. I like to call them the swamp ape. But we apparently bothered a bunch of them that were feeding, and because we were being paced and we were being kind of hemmed in, and we could tell by the sounds that we were hearing in the woods. And we had a bayou off to our right and a bunch of hills off to the left, and there was only one way in and out of where we were going. So as we got too close to the group that we think were feeding on the cane and over in the area where they had the cattle, we apparently got them very excited, because then I started smelling odors that were very reminiscent of an ape house. When the apes are getting fed and they get all stressed out, they'll start to stink. And this was like, the only thing I can relate this odor to is a hot seafood restaurant, the rear end of one, where the trash is kept on a hot summer day in Florida. I mean, it really was rancid, and it was enough to make me gag.
Now, in this same exact area, which we believe to be a birthing area, 2 weeks prior to that, there were several of us out there on an expedition, and one guy was walking up the end of that road, and there was a berm that the state or county or somebody had put in to block the road off so they couldn't go down the swamps. And as soon as he got near the berm, a small one darted on all fours right in front of him. He said it was about knee high and probably weighed, 75 pounds. The next night we were there, they got with a thermal, they've got eye shine on the thermal. It was probably 75 yards out, and it was about 8 feet off the ground. The eyes were that far apart. Nice yellow eye shine. It wasn't red, it was yellow. But it would peek around the tree and look back. Peek around the tree and get back behind the tree. It did that 8 or 10 times. So what we're believing, that being a birthing area with that small one in there, it's real thick woods. Where we're at, down the bottom, it's even thicker. You've got a creek bed, there's plenty of food, plenty of water, and plenty of cover in that whole area down in there. So that's why we're kind of thinking maybe a birthing area, or a place for them to at least raise their young ones. It's safe.
Some will never believe in Sasquatch until they see one or have a personal encounter. But to many, this creature is real, and they have had real experiences. It's the difference between believing and knowing. Sasquatch remains an elusive and mysterious creature. However, if Sasquatch hunters have their way, the physical proof of this animal will be presented to science one day soon.
I've never seen God, but I believe in God. I can't see the wind, but I can see it move the trees. I know it's here because it contains the oxygen that I breathe. You know, simply because you've never seen something doesn't mean it doesn't exist.